going? Hey, it's me, Heavy Target here again. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know what's going on with me. Unfortunately, I was just hospitalized again for 8 days for confronting a gangstalker who followed me from 3 different places around my town, and I ended up getting having the cops come to my house, and then they ended up taking me to the hospital, not believing a word that I said. So I'm going to go ahead and read my book. I've got 3 chapters done, and I've got it all pretty fine-tuned, so I'm going to go ahead and start with it. If anybody's new to the targeted individual and what's going on with the gang stalking, some of the terminologies and stuff, I'm doing a science fiction book in order to get the message out there. It's the only way I know to reach millions of people. If I do it in a nonfiction format, they're just not going to pick up the book. So I've made it exciting, hopefully enough, where I can actually get viewers and get people to maybe look into it a little more. If I do end up profiting off of the book, I'm going to donate 50% of it to a targeted individual fund for targeted individuals. So that's what I've decided to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. First chapter is Prisonix. The motorbike rider vibrates through the rough terrain of Devil's Backbone like a knife through butter, leaving a wake of dust and debris behind him. His black handkerchief wrapped tightly around his nose and mouth as the 2 loose ends behind his head flap rhythmically in the wind. Devil's Backbone is not for the tame and novice of riders. It is rough, treacherous, and very dangerous, claiming 3 lives in the last 4 to 5 decades of its existence, laying a slithering trail upon the foothills that cradle the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, riddled with sharp, protruding, angled rocks of quartz, shale, and granite, covered with pebbles and sand, creating a slick and unpredictable ride. The slightest loss of one's focus could send the lunging fool to their death or to the local hospital for a painful long stay. However dangerous, it was also very beautiful as well, curving back and forth, snaking its way through the vast valleys and wild flowering meadows that separated the amazing Colorado Rocky Mountains and the city of Denver communities below. His gloved hands gripped tightly, rattling back and forth, zigging and zagging through the dense, sharp valley brush. Anyone who was watching him from afar could easily see this was not his first rodeo. Native to Colorado, he had biked every trail on the west side at one time or another. Devil's Backbone was one of his favorites since he was young, though things on Earth had changed now. It was not the good old days racing home for Mom's meatloaf anymore. In fact, his mother had passed away a few years back. She could never believe it was happening. She just couldn't, at least that is what she told people about her son's awakening. He believed she knew, but was too scared to believe it. He respected that and didn't want her to awaken, for it was not a pleasant view. It wasn't a very pleasant event either. The man missed her greatly and wishes every day that he could spend just one more day with her. It can't happen, though, he tells himself. She is gone. He must now finish the mission of saving planet Earth and all of humanity. Standing in the way was a monstrous beast. Prisonix was its name to those awakened and part of the alliance against it. Run by those families of the Illuminati and controlled by fallen angels, archons, negative entities, or demons. Pick one, who really knows? The man who operated the motorbike today thinks they are fallen angels and demons. I believe they are as well. They are the damned from higher consciousness and light, the embracers of naught, feeding off the negative emotions of human beings for thousands of years, trapping us in a false reality of deception and lies while controlling our consciousness to keep us unaware of our true selves. The operator whizzing down the Devil's Backbone is Heavy Target. The gridsters under hypnosis and unawake living in the grid call him Heavy T. He only has 3 real close friends left, and they simply call him T. He is an awakened, targeted individual, or TI, now being hunted in Prisonix. Today was a big day, not only for Heavy T, but to the Alliance, planet Earth, and humanity. Falcon Park was his destination to pick up a very important individual. The person he was to pick up was folding here from the past. They would call him the man who dared. Spectra, one of the leaders in the Alliance and Heavy T's best friend, initiated his journey through some type of time travel remote view session. A medium named Reagan made contact in, before the fall of the 3 eyes. Reagan was able to show the man who dared what dreaded future awaited our planet and mankind if things weren't changed in order to alter its destructive path. The man who dared was crucial in changing its past because he served in the Illuminati and held the most important puzzle piece to helping save our planet, humanity, and the love to our entire existence. He was the only one high enough in ranking with any trinary consciousness left. It wasn't much, but a risk the Alliance couldn't leave unchecked. In entering the 1900s, all the Illuminati families were submerged and engulfed in darkness. The fallen angels and demons had covered them with extreme evil that the heart chakras of almost all of them were completely non-existent upon the arrival of the new millennium of 2000. Only one was left with anything of a heart or soul left in their body. The man who dared was the only one left. Reagan was the only one who knew why. Convincing Spectra of the importance in his role, Spectra said, "Let's do it." Heavy T was never too keen on the whole idea to begin with. The Illuminati had done a great deal of deceiving and destruction upon Heavy T throughout his life. He was MK Ultra'd and placed into one of their secret programs. Then upon his awakening, they began torturing him, surveillancing him, and taking away everything in his life he loved and enjoyed, including his family, even going so far as to cloning his wife and oldest daughter in order to better keep tabs on him as a targeted individual. However, Spectra was T's best friend, and he trusted him with his life. Heavy T always had his back and Spectra his. Spectra was a pagan who practiced his knowledge of the occult in utilizing the good elements of its secrets for good. Reagan was his wife and a spiritual medium since birth. She helped better shape his powers and fine-tune them in order to better serve the universal creator. She also would be the one in bringing to him the Christ consciousness, awareness, that inner love from within. It would eventually save his soul from the void and deliver love to him once again. Spectra was a formal Navy SEAL, the formal command leader of SEAL Team 17 Bravo. He was also a survivor of MK Ultra program. After 3 tours in Afghanistan, he was awarded 2 Silver Stars and a Purple Heart for his bravery and commitment to the war on terror. Following the 9/11 attacks, though, it did not come without loss. He had lost 2 Team SEAL brothers and his real brother in Iraq. His brother was a captain and proudly served in the 101st Airborne Division of the United States Army before he died. Spectra and his brother were best friends growing up. Spectra was a year older and was adopted at a very young age. He loved his brother immensely. His younger brother's nickname was Gumby. He got it not because of the green cartoon character, but because he was always chewing bubblegum. In fact, while playing in quarterback in their state championship football game, he received a pretty stiff hit by a defensive end by the name of Henry Rickle, though everyone in Kentucky knew him as Henry VIII. His gum got lodged in his throat, and Spectra charged onto the field from the bleachers. Not knowing what it was, began giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. A few seconds later, while pumping on his chest, a big wad of bubblegum came tumbling from his lips, releasing air back into his lungs. They would end up winning that game with Gumby throwing a Hail Mary into the end zone with 3 seconds left, which all the bleachers cleared on this time on his side, and would enter the field in disbelief, raising Gumby on their shoulders. Spectra and his brother partied that night pretty hard, playing beer pong till the early morning. It was also the night Spectra was told by his brother that he was enlisting. Spectra still remembers it to this day. They had both gone into the backyard together. The in-house bathrooms had lines of people waiting on those who had had too many and now regurgitated it back while kneeling in front of their new porcelain gods, pleading to never do it again. As they stood there peeing against their friend Stan's oak red painted fence, Gumby states in a slurred voice, "You know, I haven't told Mom and Dad yet, but I joined the Army." "What the hell made you decide to do a dumb fucking thing like that?" Spectra angrily replied. "You were going to the Navy to try and become a SEAL. It is honorable and it takes a lot of balls, you know," he replies. "Mom and Dad don't need to be worrying about us both, though." Spectra zips up his pants and then turns towards Gumby. "It's just I'm proud of you, brother, and I love you. If we ever go to war again, I just want to make sure we are there together somewhere," Gumby finishes with a burp, then zips up his pants while drunkenly chuckling. Spectra then outstretches his arms and says, "I'm proud of you too, brother." Gumby, with a tear slowly escaping his eye, smiles and reaches out his arms. They both hug one another for a few seconds, then make their way back to the game as Spectra laughs, saying, "You win one more beer pong game, I may be on the ground, might not ever make it to San Diego." That following summer, Spectra was sent off to the SEAL training in Coronado, California. Spectra wasn't a big fan of that small Kentucky southern lifestyle. Being adopted at the age of 6, he just always felt he didn't fit in there while growing up. He wouldn't realize till later that he was MK Ultra'd at a very young age and his entire life was being controlled and redirected in order to dumb down his abilities underneath himself. It wouldn't be till his beautiful wife came around he would see differently. Reagan would finally help him to find his true inner self. It was her who would save him from his past and teach him the love of the universal creator who loved him always. Spectra's brother, on the other hand, had a cute little girlfriend cheerleader, liked the small-town Kentucky lifestyle, and wished to be close to home. The next following summer, after Spectra left, his brother signed with the 101st Airborne Division of the United States Army. The headquarters were in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where he was stationed was only an hour driving between there and home. Spectra and his brother wrote and emailed one another almost every day, staying extremely close still, though after the events of 9/11, things began moving very fast for them both. Spectra's team was soon sent to Afghanistan, while 3 months later his brother's division was deployed to Iraq. Writing and emailing became weekly, sometimes monthly, as the intensity grew. Spectre's life became altered for the worse and would shape his direction and path for years to come on August 8th, 2009. He had just saved some friendlies from an Al-Qaeda ambush. He was in the middle of savoring one of the best Indian-made steaks from one of the saved family's grandmothers when the call of his brother's death came in. His squad leader, Viper, picked up the call and handed him the phone when it came in. He broke down immediately, putting his face into his open hands. He could never remember crying while growing up, and here he was letting it all out. Viper put a hand on his shoulder for a few seconds, then headed out the door to let the others on the team know. The news crushed Spectre. Soon his tears became enraged as he went outside the grandmother's home and unloaded a full clip of his Scar assault rifle into the air. This event would soon change his intensity for the worst. Apparently his brother had lost 4 men by accidental IED detonation while breaching a hotspot neighborhood in Fallujah, and began taking heavy fire on his unit from multiple directions. His brother called in for an airstrike and was denied 3 times because of the risk of blowing up an intelligence office a half a click away. Their squad began finally escaping on their own. They were able to make it 16 blocks or so before being trapped in an alley. An RPG was sent by rooftop, taking their lives. Spectre was given 1 month off mandatory for the funeral and family grievances. After watching his brother's casket lowered down into the earth and watching the folded flag handed to his mother as she wept, the anger inside him began to boil like nothing he had ever felt before. He couldn't wait to get back to his team. Upon arrival back to Afghanistan and his team, he was ready for blood, and he got plenty of it too. So much it began submerging his soul. The hate and anger devoured all goodness he once had inside himself, almost devouring his soul in the process. This spiral of hate and anger didn't take long to bring him down to his lowest of combat. He soon began killing enemy combatants by knife silently, not because he needed to either, but to whisper in each one of their ears, "This is for Gumby, my brother," while he sliced and tore through major arteries, watching them die. His hunger for revenge and blood became ravenous. Frightening new men under his command, he became a lost soul. After serving 3 tours and honorably discharged, he returned to the States. He was lost, on fringe of becoming a complete psychopath. He wasn't the same. He drank out of control, fought almost every night, acquiring 2 felony assaults, an attempted murder charge within his first year back. Reagan became his bright light out of the darkness. She would save him from himself, eventually making him whole again. They got married in July of 2011 before her awakening became of her in 2013. She was a medium and was able to adjust to it fairly well. Spectre's awakening began soon after and was not, especially after reading into the 9/11 attacks, therefore coming down to the possible unfortunate conclusion that it was likely staged by rich, fat banking families in order to strip this country of its constitution. It wasn't longer after that Reagan and Spectre began fighting a lot about the gangstalkers, electronic harassment, and sabotaged events that began making havoc while plaguing their lives. The gangstalkers eventually started using RF energy weapons. Reagan finally would have to call the police because Spectre became so enraged one morning after gangstalking neighbors used an RF energy weapon on him every night for 5 consecutive days, heating him with radiation while he tried to sleep, even causing some lesions and small blisters on his chest and lower back. Reagan had been successful in talking him down every night, but day 5 came as Spectre began loading his 9mm and sharpening his knife. Not sure if the neighbors using the weapon on him realized the caliber individual they were inflicting their damage upon, though if it had been me and I knew it was Spectre, the command leader of SEAL Team 17, I wouldn't be in the same country as him. Obviously either blackmailed, lied to, or paid like most of these degenerate gangstalkers to inflict this electronic damage. They were unaware and never knew in their worst nightmares what possibly could have happened to them that day. Heavy T looks back on that day, thanking the Lord that Reagan made the call to police with tears streaming down her face, taking him to the mental health center. Even Spectre agreed to this day, or 2 people would be dead and another rotting in a state prison on a Capital One life sentence. Making one last loop towards the top of Rattlesnake Hill, he unstraps the chin strap on his helmet. After the last curve, he kicks a slight clod of mud from his peg, then twists his wrists again, buzzing the motorcycle to higher gears, leaning forward to keep his balance centered, climbing the last hill to the rest stop. Soon he reaches the top, turning off his bike. Then after stepping one leg over the gas compartment, he lifts the seat, once under him, pulling his canteen from within. Standing while savoring the cool breeze now coming off the Rocky Mountain snow-covered peaks. He takes 2 nice gulps from his canteen before fixating his eyes upon the city of Denver below. His eyes still wide in amazement. He can't believe the extent of their madness to control the masses. Suddenly, he finds himself drifting in, though remembering the day when the fear of Prisonix draped itself over his body like an ice-cold blanket. How everything had almost seemed to change overnight. The sky became darker, the stars more distant. The morning air contained no more freshness anymore. No dew, no more clear, transparent, seasoned aroma. It smelled like the day before and the day before that. Clouds were not clouds like most people would remember before. No, these clouds were manufactured for us. Yes, that's right, for you. Just another layer of aluminum oxide encoded swarm of nanobots to keep us all in line and not thinking outside the grid. The wave arrow patterns with the slight reflecting blue is how we are starting to remember clouds these days. Each day that passes, more memories seem to become a distant glance. Beazle and his minions are beginning to do what we all thought to be impossible, by creating and controlling the first Prisonix our planet has ever seen. Artificial intelligence clones were their boots on the ground, able and always ready to round up any awakenings or targeted individuals that may be spotted by their advanced telepathy neurosense technology. Yes, oh, you didn't know. They can read our thought patterns. Now I know what you're thinking. This is bad. Very bad, isn't it? Heavy T takes another gulp off his canteen, spitting half of it into his sunglasses he held coated in dust. He then took the back of his handkerchief and cleaned the insides and outsides to a shimmering shine. Then putting his shades on, he ties the handkerchief again around his nose and mouth while taking one last gaze over the city of Denver below. Counting slowly to himself of the surveillance crafts, he puts his canteen back under his seat. Then suddenly a dust cloud catches his eye from behind him. Someone had been alerted to his voyage. There were 3 dust wakes about 1.5 miles back behind him. He then spots a shiny reflection flying 20 feet above them. He quickly pulls out his binoculars for a better look. He sees 3 AICs and a flying birdie and or predator terrain drone, whichever you prefer. Oh shit, Heavy mutters to himself while tucking the binoculars away next to him. He had to find a cave or stream fast. As he jumped on his bike, he kicked the start peg at the same time. His grip tightly on the throttle, he twists his wrist back and began heading down. He knew a place he could lose them. It was called Whale Rock, and it was close to his parents' old house. It was a huge red sandstone rock formation that resembled a huge sperm whale. It was also filled with caverns and crevices that could easily defend against the signals of the terrestrial drone. He knew once inside he could wrap himself up and hide there. Quickly he descended down the hill and over a gully. Then he spotted them, 2 prairie rattlers. He applies his brakes, skidding to a halt. One was still nestled and coiled on a slab of limestone, and the other 4 feet away had just began its nightly food search. He grabs the first stick he can, finding one next to a yucca plant that looks as if some hikers may have used it in order to better climb the trail. He takes the coiled one and pokes at him, stirring him around like a carousel in order to straighten him into moving. He then lifts him gently and places him on the trail, then lunges for the other snake as it almost slithers under a rock. He then takes this one, who is about 12 to 16 inches larger, and places it on the trail, too. Heavy T then starts poking at them from above on the trail to once again coil them up in their defensive snake posture. As he pulls out his red handkerchief, sticking it on the end while doing so. Then after they are fired up and angry enough, he throws his handkerchief in between them, jumping on his bike again. He continues down, gunning the throttle to an easy 40 to 45 miles per hour, rocketing over a gully and up Rabbit Ear Pass towards Whale Rock. Within a couple of minutes, he reaches Whale Rock, jumping off his bike. He then moves it 10 feet off the trail into some blackberry bushes. Breaking twigs and branches, he lays them over his bike, concealing it entirely. He grabs his canteen and pack, heading to the crevice's opening. Warily looking down its opening, he tries to remember the footholds and handholds in order of making it down. Just then he hears the motorbikes approaching the top of Rattlesnake Hill. Heavy T crouches down, pulling his binoculars from his pack. He begins retracting the trail up in order to see his handkerchief. He can see it, just barely visible through a small shrub. He crosses his fingers. The drone is the first one to spot the handkerchief as the AICs approach. 2 of them are dressed like ranchers, and the third looks like a controller wearing the usual black and red sweats. The 2 rancher-dressed AICs arrive at the handkerchief first. One seems to yell and wave towards their controller, almost to say, "We found something." The controller stops back about 10 feet from the others and begins to get off his bike when he suddenly jumps up in the air. Heavy T's deadly little rattling friends seem to have found someone to unleash their anger upon. The other 2 start walking towards him. Then the controller jumps again, though this time slips upon landing, falling on his ass, then grasping suddenly at his face as the other two jogged towards him steadily, looking around the ground. The controller's mouth is wide open, as if screaming in agonizing pain, still cusping his jaw with his right hand. The other two AICs in a panic as they desperately comb the ground for any large rocks or sticks that may detour or possibly terminate their controller's rattling little friends. Finally, one approaches towards him with a large branch and begins swiping the ground next to him. Heavy T lets out a chuckle, saying, "That's right, get him, bite him," thinking to himself of the Three Stooges and what a great episode this would have made. They finally are able to free the controller as they both lift him up and lay him across, then sit him up on the back seat of their bike. They then leave his bike and other two bikes, carrying him back the way they came in, hoping to bring him to the nearest hospital, I suppose. The drone, puzzled and confused, follows behind them slowly. Heavy T then says, "That's what you get, parading out here in Mother Nature, you scumbags," laughing hysterically as the results of it all. Heavy T looks down the crevice entrance one last time as he stands up, putting his binoculars in his pack once again, puzzled on whether he would have remembered the way down or not, and thanking God that today it needed no assurance. He then walked to where his bike had been covered and took off the twigs and grass that covered it, shaking the fallen debris from his seat and handlebars, thinking to himself how much more was ahead in order to make his pickup. One more loop around Rabbit Ear Pass and a twist through Cedar Falls. He would then be starting his ascension up Falcon Park to meet his time-traveling guest. He then jumped on his bike and buzzed back down the trail towards Falcon Park. Once he arrived that afternoon for the climb up Falcon Park just off the small town of Morrison, it was cold and windy. Heavy T stopped his bike on the bottom of Falcon Trail. He then opened his seat to one last gulp from his canteen, again spitting some more into his sunglasses, wiping them again of dust and debris, then using the bottom portion of his shirt to dry them before putting them back on. Then kicked the dirt from his left boot before kicking the starting peg, and away he went. Falcon Trail is more of a hiking path than motorcycle trail. It pretty much Z'd its way up the mountain in novice fashion. To an experienced rider like Heavy T, it was like riding a big wheel in the backyard. Reaching the top in 17 minutes flat, it was 4:20 p.m. The man who dared was to arrive at 4:30 p.m. Upon his early arrival, Heavy T took a protein bar from his pack and began to eat it, while he looked out for any more unexpected visitors who may have followed him there. 4:30 came and went by, and still no sign of him. He began to nibble on some trail mix, nervously still waiting. "Where the hell is he?" T muttered impatiently to himself. Heavy T had been waiting for many things. He waited on living a happy and beautiful life again. He waited for sanity to drown the madness of this Prisonix realm. He waited for a savior to descend from the heavens with an army of archangels cleaning this negativity and demons from this earth. This moment, however, he waited on the man who dared. The Colorado foothills pushed its cold Rocky Mountain winds across the buffalo grass every 15 to 20 seconds or so before him, making spiraling patterns through its dense green blades, as if invisible fingers were combing through them, giving him a message from beyond the heavens. It was now 4:44 and still no sign of the man who dared. T began to worry that something went terribly wrong. The sun was just beginning to fade over the first peak, making the wind colder than the last with each chilling new gust. Then it happened. T sprang to attention like a cadet in boot camp taking the sergeant's instruction. Starting its arrival with a loud booming pop, a tear was now noticeable about 5 feet off the ground just outside the awning-covered picnic table at the top of Mount Falcon. Then a violet-covered spiral shot like a bullet through the sky, boosting its way towards the tear. It was about 4 feet in diameter and seemed to cut through the air like a hole saw through wood, leaving no material behind its entry. T then watched as a blue sphere emanated from the tear that was so bright he had to squint and occasionally turning his head in quick half-second jerks as it slowly pushed through the gape. T then could now see a shadow of a man next to a white glowing orb. The orb began small but got bigger and bigger. As it did, the shadow of the man got smaller and smaller. This was followed by a crack like a bolt of lightning, and then another loud pop as the tear then closed, leaving behind a 6'2" man naked with no clothes. He was curled up in a fetal position. Heavy T wasted no time reaching into the backpack, grabbing the garments Spectre gave upon his arrival. The man who dared's hands were twitching while gripping at the air like a tiger awakening from an afternoon nap. His feet were completely locked in position as if he was trying to push his heels through some invisible wall. Then he let out a loud yell. "Arg!" rang out from his tense, chapped lips. The man who dared then rolled over to all fours. Heavy T then threw his garments in front of him while turning his back towards him in order to respect his privacy. Heavy T then says, "Welcome to the year 2021. The man who dared, still regaining his senses, fumbles out hoarsely, "Oh, that was one intense ride." Heavy T replies, "Sure looked like it." "You must be Heavy T," the man who dared asks. Heavy T takes a second full canteen from under his seat and hands it to him. "That's what they refer to me as in the grid," he answers. "Why don't you get changed and get some of that water in you? I'm going to take a quick peek around and make sure no AICs or nosy gridsters saw or heard this unexplainable event." The man who dared replies with a nod. "Sounds good." He then slips the Colorado University sweatshirt over his head and slides his arms gently through. After finishing getting dressed, the man who dared swigs the water Heavy T had given him, while stretching his legs as he pushes against the picnic table. When Heavy T returns, he begins to shake out his dust mask and cleans his glasses again. "I bet you're hungry." "Yes, very much so. Starving, in fact," the man replies. "I figured you would be. I was told you couldn't eat for 3 days before making your fold here. Therefore, I brought you a couple protein bars and some trail mix for the descend back down. Figured we could grab some burgers to go in Morrison when we get back and eat by the river while filling you in some." "Sounds great," the man replies with a smile. "Catch." Heavy T tosses the protein bars towards him. "Let's get a move on. Jump on the back. You're in for a treat. Make sure you hold on tight around my waist. It's a pretty novice ride back down, but I intend on getting down fast. It's starting to get colder, and in another hour, when the sun falls beyond those peaks, the temperature will drop another 20 for sure." The man who dared chuckles. "You sure this is safe?" jumping on the back behind him. "Nothing is safe here, but this is as safe as you can get for now." He then kicks it buzzing as they descend down the mountain. Heavy T felt great right now. His day had gone very well. No one was hurt, killed, or tortured. Then he remembered something that bothered him greatly last week. In Prisonix, as a targeted individual, it was not living but surviving, counting the days and sometimes the hours till your warm death. Last week, Heavy T got scared for the first time in a long while. It wasn't the demons, the AICs, the predator drones, or even death itself that scared him. However, just a thought, one little tiny thought, had scared him more than... Hang on, that's my son. I'm going to pause it for a second. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, one little tiny thought had scared him more than anything he had ever experienced since Prisonix was born. The thought had plagued T's mind since last week, hit him like no other thought ever did. The thought was, for the first time since he could remember, he was scared he might forget the happiness of what life was. The enjoyment of that Sunday walk at the park after dinner. The enjoyment of attending a baseball game or camping in the mountains with family and friends. That thought scared him more than Prisonix ever could. Soon Heavy T and the man who dared were down the mountain, occasionally with the crunch of protein bars he had given the man who dared in his ear. The sun had finally slipped behind the mountains. Cold air devoured the radiant sunny day swiftly without mercy. Heavy T knew a fire would need to be built pretty quick and wasted no time coming off the mountain trail. So anyway, he comes down the mountain trail, he gets burgers for him, and just kind of blowing through a little bit of it. And then he starts sitting down with him and to tell him about Prisonix. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip to that part as they're eating their cheeseburgers and blah, 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 blah. And so anyway, so they start off, yes, he says, I have in fact read all the dossiers, not once, but twice, 3 times, in order to understand all the circumstances. This is basically the man who dared telling him, basically Heavy T asked him if he got the dossiers on all the characters, you know, that he was going to be meeting with when he came, because he sent them back in time for him to read over. I also understand my role in turning this path around while I'm here and what I must do, the man who dared pronounced swiftly. That's very good, and we appreciate your bravery in coming here. Now, I know you're going to have questions. However, why don't you just let me start in describing the timelines and how the slavery matrix control grid became Prisonix. And this is going to kind of fill people in on the reality of it, what's actually going on right now in the world right now, and what's going on with TIs, because this is actually a lot of truth that's going to be in this next couple of pages here. And how, hopefully in doing so, it may answer many of the questions you do have. First, the bad news. The 13 families, including yours, are all 100% dominated and controlled by Beazle and the fallen angels. Their consciousnesses have all been plugged into the beast and or Prisonix. Meaning of this is simple. Their souls, unfortunately, are now owned and controlled by the beast and can only exist on this plane of consciousness. They can never ascend out, remaining the darkness in this realm forever. I'm sorry, but it cannot be undone. The man who dared looks into the fire as a tear slowly crawls softly down his cheek. Then he softly speaks. I couldn't change them. They thought with the knowledge of the old world that they could win this planet while saving the family's bloodlines in the process. They had not a care in the world for anyone but themselves and our dysfunctional, twisted family survival. Heavy T takes a pause and says, I'm very sorry and I feel for you. We have all accounted for great losses due to the deception, lies, and destruction at the hands of these fallen angels and demons. I do not hate you, blame you, nor your families anymore for their assistance in creating Prisonix. I have forgiven them. What is done is done. That hatred I harbored for way too long. So I have put it to rest. The man who dared slowly turns his head towards him, whispering sorrowfully, thank you. Heavy T, still fixating his gaze upon the fire, nods gently and says, you're welcome. He then continues, it was all started by way of the system. As you know, Earth has been a prison planet for thousands of years in order to control and deceive human beings into not finding higher self, in order to stop them from finding greater love and peace through their Christ consciousness. Therefore, the system was put in place thousands of years ago, creating false religions, philosophies, sciences, histories, politics, and events in order to distract human beings from their true self, creating a false reality by these entities or fallen angels in order to feed off their lower vibrations and negative emotions, thus allowing their existence here. Prisonix is the same system on steroids with virtually 100% control of the grid. Prisonix is a state-of-the-art new virtual replica of the old Earth, but it also has many new features, laws, and controls implemented, not just to its creation, but to maintaining its global dominance and control in this realm. Prisonix, or the Beast, has been fine-tuned, you see, to near perfection. It simultaneously knows everything an individual does, says, sees, reads, hears, buys, thinks, and even feels on the grid. These aren't just targeted individuals like me now. I'm talking about every human being now. When your family and others of the Illuminati talked about the all-seeing eye of this new world order, they weren't joking. Not only does it see and know everything, get this, it can predict behavior and thoughts as well. Prisonix can control thought patterns to bring forth negative emotional responses, giving these negative entities more food when they are hungry. Nice feeding tube, isn't it? The individuals or human beings, which makes up about 80% of the population, are currently locked in its trance, completely unaware. We refer to them as gridsters or humanobots. The politicians, reporters, actors and actresses, sports people, and all others that can sometimes present themselves through TVs, air projectors, and or any other type of screen to be seen by the humanobots are called puppets. Most all of them have been cloned and can be controlled in real time like puppets. This was all done between 2018 and 2019 because some whistleblowers in the media united one afternoon to report what had happened to our planet once they found out. However delayed all programming was, Prisonix shut down every device on the planet so no one would see it. For 3 days or so, no news was reported in order to straighten the issue up. When the programming and news was continued 3 days later, the new clone puppets blamed the power outage on sun's solar flares. Prisonix, you see, it wasn't hard to create. Human beings had become so materialistic in nature, especially when it pertained to technology. In fact, give your family credit. Technology became the bait. What people refer to as bling, now, or style in your time, was the hook. In fact, a couple of times human beings were trampled to death just so others could buy it first. Every time a new piece of technology was introduced, well, it became another tool for the beast to use in controlling humanity more. Every new technology synced with everything else, like adding new bars to our cells each time. It would first start its testing in the 1970s, towards the end, in fact. Your family's Stasi program was its training wheels of experimentation, testing, and fine-tuning of Prisonix. It was also a great way to silence and dispose of all the children involved in the secret underground programs, the Indigos, the Crystal and Rainbow children as well. They also targeted whistleblowers, political dissidents, activists, doctors with cures for cancer, scientists of new energy technologies, and anyone else who posed any threat to their new agenda of total world domination. You mean the Stasi movement that used psychological torture to kill and silence the problem Jewish whistleblowers of the communities before the Nazis began the Holocaust? The man who dared exclaimed. Yes, however, technology had become 20 times more faster and fine-tuned by the early 1980s, and by 2007 there was nowhere a targeted individual could go to escape its grasp. The new Stasi movement didn't just use community gangstalking and blacklisting from employment like the old formula. It was extreme now. They used gangstalking, 24/7 electronic surveillance, electronic harassment, and even RF energy and direct EMF energy weapons to torture and torment its victims. Like the old, they still infiltrated their workplace and slandered and defamed them as being unstable, sexual deviants, or child molesters in order to destroy their reputations. However, their new Stasi movement would set them up, use RF energy weapons on them while they worked, break into their lockers, and steal items from them as well. They also had technology now to map out a targeted individual's brain and monitor the person's major arteries. If the individual being targeted had a bad heart, they could use these electronic weapons to create more problems in that particular area. Anyone who had awakened or anyone who helped to shed light onto these things being done became a target. They would also use some of the targeted individuals' last stands against their gangstalkers as false flags to implement stiffer gun laws. After the implementation of martial law in September 2017, targeted individuals were no longer hunted and tortured using that old Nazi Stasi formula anymore. No, those invisible techniques designed for silent kill, making the target commit suicide, committing them to a mental hospital to die, or just RF energy blasting them for so long there was no way in hell for them not to finally acquire a long disease-riddled list of health problems, sending them to a slow, torturous death with either cancer, lupus, diabetes, and many more, just to name a few, caused by this constant radiation exposure and stress to the individual. It became much, much worse. After martial law, they now hunt in the open, and are not afraid to use deadly force now neither. There was nowhere to hide if you awakened. The gridsters were encouraged to rat us out too, you see. That's why we can't hang with them no more. Once martial law came into effect, it was real bad. I believe that in the first year alone, over 80,000 targeted individuals or awakened were killed. The TIs were slaughtered in that first year. We could not figure out how they knew who had awakened and who had not. Therefore, the awakened all headed for the underground. Effective at first, we were able to barricade sections in the subway systems, sewage tunnels, and other city underground tunnel systems. After surviving eating rats and rodents found the first 2 months, they soon became scarce. We began deploying scouting groups out for food, water, and other supplies. However, only 20% made it back, 5% with no supplies but the shirts on their backs. We were hungry, thirsty, sick, and malnourished. Arguments and fighting began to occur through our desperation as hope became only a word sought through dream. Though soon our nightmare would become worse. They soon began sending these insectobots down after us. Nasty things they were. They looked like spiders but had 10 legs instead of 8. They were black, and in the dark they had these glowing triangle-shaped, hideous dark orange eyes. Their eyes would occasionally project these laser scans over the environment every so often. They not only crawled, but when within a 2 to 3 foot distance of their victims, could jump. After they launched themselves, the legs folded under them and 2 needle fangs would then protrude from their faces, sinking their fangs into the victim and creating these pus-infected lesions upon them, proving to be fatal within 8 to 12 hours of initial bite, attacking indiscriminately men, women, and children, aiming for the neck, face, or chest area. Soon we discovered they would also inject the poisonous venom into our food or water left uncovered as people slept, clattering as they crawled through barricades, cracks, and holes not sealed thoroughly in defense efforts. We were scared and panicked as the end seemed inevitable now. Though it was an event called the Fall of the Three Eyes that would save us from our ominous path of death. Orchestrated by the well-known hacking movement Anonymous, it would prove pivotal in our escape to our existence, out of our hell, buying us a 2 to 3 month window to our moving to above ground again and gaining the necessary knowledge into the technology being used in hunting and killing us. You see, the USA portion of the grid was predominantly run by 4 satellites. These satellites controlled the information paths of the brain mapping programs that identified awakened individuals and threats from non-awakened individuals in the grid, while also controlling the signals of data, the artificial intelligence clones, predator drones, terrain surveillance operations, and any other technologies the beast of Prisonix was using to eliminate our existence in this realm. It was February 6, 2019 when it all happened. Anonymous somehow was able to hack into one of the 4 satellites. One of their newest members orchestrated and executed the entire event. Was he a defense or CIA defector from the government? Asked the man who dared. No, man, not even close. He was a 16-year-old black kid from the streets of Chicago. His father was one of the 4 founding leaders of the Black Panther Party, third in command, answering directly only to their leader, Huey P. Newton himself. His father was later set up, then charged using false testimonies and allegations through the government's Cointelpro operation designed to break apart their movement. Sentenced to 22-year sentence for drug trafficking. He had never sold any drugs in his entire life. They planted drugs in his home and raided it using DEA agents that were coerced and paid off in order to charge and convict him. His father would later never see his day of freedom, murdered in prison 6 years later by an unknown inmate and never solved to this day. These events would alter and change the boy Isaiah for his entire life forever. Soon becoming Homeland Security's worst nightmare, he would help WikiLeaks in exposing the corrupt and injustice that plagued humanity's freedoms today. You said they only hacked into one satellite, but 3 would fall. What happened to the other 2? Okay, so this kid is brilliant. He was able to find a self-destruction program hidden in the binary code. I guess in case of it being compromised, the designer added it in as a precautionary in its defense. Isaiah was not only able to hack into its self-destruction programming mode, but move it in between 2 of the others before its execution, therefore bringing down the other 2 simultaneously, leaving only one left which mainly controlled the far east of the U.S. Man, it was an awesome event, and well, couldn't have come at a better time. We were saying prayers of farewell those last 2 nights leading up to it, planning one last go to above ground to fight to our last breath. The news was streamed through YouTube using the Tor network, which was almost completely controlled and infiltrated from the beast by this time. Though there were still some tunnels not completely regulated because they were switched 5 times a day in order to confuse the system. When the word of it broke, people were cheering, crying, and thanking the Lord for the prayers being answered. We said our goodbyes to those who had been lost and headed up to celebrate when we reached the above ground. There were fireballs coming down through the dark sky, 3 large ones as the atmosphere began incinerating their unwelcoming return home to their builders. As those small fragments also broke off into smaller ones, cheering and happiness filled the air that night to become the new 4th of July that, though now called the Fall of the 3 Eyes, liberating us from our hell. I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and then I'll continue in a couple of days, but just wanted to throw, that's about half the first chapter. So it's kind of a long first chapter, but that's got to get through a lot of the history of it and stuff. So send me your comments, guys. Let me know what you guys think of it so far, and I'm just going to keep writing it, and I'm going to get this word out however I need to get it out, and hopefully this is a good move, I hope. So let me know what you guys think. Gang Stalkers, you don't need to reply. We know what you guys think, and you guys have yourselves a great night. Thank you.